It's been nearly 2 months since President Trump signed his big, beautiful bill into law. We're sitting down with Congressman John Rutherford to talk about the impact it will have on local families. Plus, after the president's meeting with Vladimir Putin and then a White House summit with Volodymyr Zelenskyy and European leaders, where does the effort to end the war in Ukraine stand right now? We break it down with our political analyst, Rick Mullaney. And also check in on the Jacksonville City Council's efforts to nail down a budget for the next year on This Week in Jacksonville. Thank you for joining us this morning. Congress convenes on Capitol Hill again on Tuesday after the holiday weekend and after a few weeks when members spent time back in their districts. We've used that as a chance to talk with some of our local lawmakers about what is happening in D.C. So joining us this morning, Congressman and former Jacksonville Sheriff John Rutherford. It's now been nearly 2 months since the tax break and spending bill known as the One Big Beautiful Bill was passed and signed into law. It extends the 2017 tax breaks, but also makes investments in national security, incentivizes domestic manufacturing, puts money toward monetizing air traffic control or making it updated. So let's start on the Big Beautiful Bill, Congressman. Let me start back when it passed. This was a divisive bill. I mean, it's why Elon Musk and President Trump kind of parted ways, it seemed like, and there was a lot of fighting over it. How is the party dealing with that now that it's passed and we're kind of getting into the swing of it?
Well, that's the way the system's supposed to work, Scott. And it worked well. You know, there were a lot of give and takes. The issue between the SALT taxes and when the work requirements for Medicaid would kick in, those were negotiated one up, one back, and so we came to agreement, and that's how we got 100% unanimous support, Republican support, for the One Big Beautiful Bill and its passage.
You mentioned Medicaid. That has been one of the criticisms of Democrats, considerable cuts there, and concerns that people are going to lose coverage.
Yeah.
Talk to me about this.
Scott, no one is going to lose their benefits. No one. What we're going after is waste, fraud, and abuse, some of which was identified through the DOGE process. But when you look at the fact that there are 1.2 million people who are double dipping in Medicaid, they are registered in 2 or more states, and there's some crazy number of people that are, I heard, that are registered in 12 states. So a lot of fraud there. The other double dipper group is 1.6 million who are actually double dipping in Medicaid and ACA. And here's what's been the problem with this, I think, Scott. The states actually administer the Medicaid program. They decide who's qualified. They do all of the eligibility work. The federal government simply pays the bill. Well, that obviously can no longer work because if you look, since 2019, Medicaid costs have gone up 60%. And most of it, I think, Scott, is a result of fraud that the states have allowed to creep into their system.
So there's been estimates of, I've seen numbers as high as 20 million thrown around could lose coverage. You're disputing that.
No.
You say it's the fraud that's going.
No. The people that are going to lose their coverage are the people that shouldn't be on there to begin with. They're registered in multiple states. They have coverage and they're on Medicaid. No, I dispute that.
The president recently kind of in some statements rebranded the bill. He's moving away from the One Big Beautiful Bill, wants to focus more on tax cuts. A lot of belief is because polling has struggled on this. Have you struggled to get the message to voters of what this bill is?
Yes, and absolutely, and I'm going to tell you why. I think because of the way the CBO scored the bill. The Congressional Budget Office scored this bill as a $3.2 trillion deficit bill. It's wrong. And they were wrong on the Tax Cut Jobs Act. That bill, they said, was a $1.2 trillion deficit bill, yet because when they scored the growth inside that bill, they said the economy was only going to grow at 1.9% for 10 years. They were wrong. Remember what the economy was growing, the GDP was back in 18, 19, and 20? It was 3.5. 1 percentage point of extra growth back then was $274 billion a year. That's $2.7 trillion for the life of that bill. So just growth alone would have covered the deficit that they said was in that bill. Now the CBO does the same thing with the One Big Beautiful Bill, which, by the way, just saved the American taxpayers from the biggest tax increase ever, $4.5 trillion. And so that, that shouldn't be lost on people, what it would have gone back to had we not passed this bill. And remember, this is an extension. This is not a tax cut. This is an extension. Only in Washington, D.C., when you refuse to let something go up $4.5 trillion, is that a cut?
I do want to hit you on another subject because it gets into your background. You're about to return to Washington, D.C., where the president has federalized law enforcement in the district.
Yes.
You've got a law enforcement background, massively discussed issue. What have your thoughts been of the president deciding to do this, A, in the nation's capital, and buzz about in other cities?
Yeah. Listen, I think it's a great move, particularly for Washington, D.C. And think about this. Because crime really was a problem. I mean, we had members that were getting mugged and, carjacked, all of that. So I don't believe, when they say the numbers are down, I don't believe that.
Well, I want to know because...
Let me say why I think this is a great idea. And it's been done before. Governor Hochul in New York City, remember when the homeless woman was burned in the subway? Burned to death in the subway, and people were getting pushed in front of trains every day? What did the governor do? She put the National Guard inside the subways. That's all President Trump is doing. He's putting the National Guard into the dangerous areas of Washington, D.C., and cleaning up the camps, the homeless camps. I think those are all good objectives.
Should this go to other cities? For instance, Jacksonville. During your tenure as sheriff, we saw massive crime speeds in certain years. I want to say like 06, 07. Should the president be going into other cities when they have bad...
Jacksonville was never compared to Washington,
Never
D.C.
compared to Washington, D.C.
Never. In fact, in 2011, we had the lowest murder numbers in 40 years in Jacksonville.
So if we have a bad year, we would never be to that level, is what you're saying.
Well, they haven't had a bad year in D.C. It's been a bad couple decades.
But do you think you should look at other cities like a Chicago or some of the other cities where there's...
Well, what I would hope is that those communities would look at themselves. And I will tell you, Scott, it's not just a police problem. It's a prosecution problem. It's how the whole criminal justice system works together for accountability. And there is no accountability in Washington, D.C. I don't blame all of this on MPD. A lot of this has to do with how particularly juveniles are not being prosecuted when they are being arrested by the Metropolitan Police Department.
Congressman Rutherford, it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us on the show today. Glad we could sit down and catch up with you.
Thank you,
Congressman.
Thank you.
And we talked about the president's big, beautiful bill. So how's it being received outside of the nation's capital? Political analyst Rick Mullaney joins us as we talk about Americans' opinions on the bill. That's next on This Week in Jacksonville.
You're watching This Week in Jacksonville.
We were speaking about the president's big tax cut and spending bill with Congressman Rutherford, the bill known originally as the One Big Beautiful Bill, but this past week the president said he may stop using that name, saying the name isn't helping with the White House's sales pitch. It comes at a time when polling shows Americans are mixed on the piece of legislation. A Pew Research survey shows that from earlier in August found only 32% of Americans approve of the law, while 46% disapprove, and 23% are unsure. Joining us now, News4JAX political analyst and director of the JU Public Policy Institute, Rick Mullaney. Rick, what does it say when opinion of the bill is touted so heavily, but they're so mixed?
Good morning. It's great to be with you, Scott. Scott, one of the challenges Republicans have, and probably the main piece of this bill, is that it makes permanent the 2017 Trump tax cuts from 10
Which
years.
were never taken away during the Biden administration.
No, it was 10 years. It was set to sunset this year in 2005. And as the congressman said, it would have been a $4.5 trillion tax increase if you hadn't done this. So this bill, if you're looking at what it did, this is number one on the list. It made permanent those tax cuts. The challenge is that people aren't going to feel that because it's preserving the status quo. It's preserving it the way it has been for the last decade. So Republicans are now beginning to shift their message a little bit, beginning to talk a little bit about the pledge on no tax on tips, for example, for which there's a tax deduction, no tax on overtime, for which there's now a tax deduction. There was a pledge to do away with taxes on Social Security, and although it didn't go that far, it did give a senior discount for taxes. And so more of an emphasis is being put there and an increase in the child tax credit, and less so on that tax cut because Americans aren't really going to feel that in their pocketbook. They're just going to preserve the status quo.
There, throughout this whole process, has been criticism from the right, actually, that it doesn't cut enough. Elon Musk, obviously, in that camp, but, you know, that it's adding to the deficit. I mean, are we really making progress if, as Doge's stated goal was to cut the spending, did this do that?
Well, Scott, one of the signature pieces of this was making the tax cuts permanent. The second piece is the debt. And this is where Elon Musk got very, very vocal. He talked about spending, and he talked about the tax cuts, and he said that this would increase it dramatically. The CBO says that this will increase the deficit by $3.4 trillion. Other estimates put it as high as $4.4 trillion. So a big issue with some, this is disputed by Republicans, but certainly Democrats are very vocal on this issue, is that this bill, with its spending and its cuts, increases the deficit by trillions of dollars, depending on the estimate you're looking at. As the congressman said, however, Republicans did rally around this bill. They were unified. They have very narrow margins in the House and Senate, and they did pass this bill. So I do think you have a unified Republican Party. But for now, at least, the Democrats are doing well on the messaging because of the lack of popularity of the bill.
I want to move to Ukraine. That's something we haven't talked about yet. The president just had a summit with Putin, had a second kind of summit at the White House with Zelenskyy. Are we seeing progress here? As the president during the campaign really implicated that, you know, he might, or he intimated he might end this war. It's not over yet.
He didn't really intimate it. He said it. But what he said was, I will end it on day one. And no one thought he would do it on day one. But it did show he was serious about it. On a positive note, there's been the first movement with Putin to suggest that there could be security guarantees for Ukraine. That's a pretty big development because for Ukraine, that is number one, without question. Given the violation of past security agreements by Russia, in 1994 the Budapest Agreement that Russia violated, in 2014 with the invasion of Crimea, in 2019, then the invasion in 2020, the security guarantees are critical, and for the first time, Putin has suggested he's open to security guarantees. Second, Zelenskyy has indicated for the first time there's a crack in the door to maybe ceding some territory, and that's going to be hugely important in getting this resolved. But let me say this, Scott, coming out of the Alaska summit, Putin really did have his way. He was facing a ceasefire. There was no ceasefire. He was concerned about secondary sanctions. There weren't any. And instead, he wanted to move this towards a peace agreement, which is giving him more time now to what he's doing, continuing his military operations to increase his strength at the bargaining table, or to simply, he hopes, to overrun Ukraine. So there's a glimmer of hope on those two fronts, but negotiations have kind of stalled. This is obviously a really challenging problem.
Politically, for the president, for the Republicans going into the midterms, I mean, the president really wants to make it look like he is a peace president. That's how he's portrayed himself here. And then obviously Gaza is still going on. Have they made enough progress to politically come out going into the midterms as we start to ratchet it up here soon and say, hey, we've made progress here. Peace is happening?
Not where we are today. What happens over the next several months is going to be critical. The report card comes a year from November in those midterm elections. President Trump has taken a high-risk strategy when it comes to Ukraine. You saw that in the Oval Office in February when he took on Zelenskyy. You've seen his approach where he has at times cut off intelligence or military aid to Ukraine. He shifted in his tone somewhat over the last several months. But as we stand today, Russia is in a better place now than it was when President Trump took office. Russia is expanding aggressively on the military front. It's taking over more territory. It wants that Donbass region to the east. And so for President Trump, he still has some cards to play. He can still use the secondary sanctions on oil and gas when it comes to Turkey, China, India, which just went into effect. And he also can increase military aid for Ukraine. So he has some cards to play, and I think the president in the next few weeks needs to do that. For now, Putin is having his way, and Putin is advancing militarily.
Well, Rick, it's certainly been an exciting conversation on the national and the global front. We do need to transition, and let's talk about that. So we will be shifting our focus from Washington to the River City, how talks of property tax cuts are figuring into Jacksonville's budget debate, as Rick Mullaney stays with us next on This Week in Jacksonville.
You're watching This Week in Jacksonville on Channel 4.
Welcome back. News4JAX political analyst Rick Mullaney still with us as we shift our focus to our city government here in Jacksonville. The city council has about another month to nail down a budget for next year, and one of the recent topics has been a property tax rate cut. Let's break that down, discussing the budget. Rick, I just spoke to the mayor about this, and we heard from a lot of Republicans on the city council. Kind of comes on the heels of all the DOGE talk of cutting stuff in government. They want a property tax, the Republicans want a property tax cut. Mayor Deegan saying to keep the property taxes where she would like them is $1 extra, I think, a month for taxpayers. Where do you see this going?
Well, I think it's a piece of a much bigger discussion on the future of the city. I think Mayor Deegan and the council president are both very compelling when they make their case. And I say the council president who's leading this along with several other Republicans. For Mayor Deegan, she frames this as fundamental services. Particularly, she talks about affordable housing, health care, and why we need to fund some of these. I think on the city council president Republican side, they're taking a look at this and they say, wait a second. Right now, taxpayers in Duval County are hurting. We've had pretty significant tax increases in the last few years. When you take a look at the mill increase for education, for example.
I do want to interrupt there because Mayor Deegan told me that of the major cities in Florida, we have the lowest property tax rate.
Well, bundle it together. I think the case that she makes is an important one, which is on a per capita basis. Many do argue on a per capita basis that we're actually lower and underinvested in public safety, for example, parks and other areas. But in recent years, if you're looking at just property taxes, you're missing some of the other pieces. The gas tax increase, the garbage tax increase, the half-cent increase for the school district. And the millage rate has gone actually from 8.3 at a low to 11.3 where it is right now in terms of mills. So the people of Jacksonville, plus inflation and the reassessment of their homes. And I think on the Republican side, they're being a little bit sensitive to this notion of what the people in Jacksonville are trying to do, making their budget work. Donna Deegan, on the other hand, is taking this long view of what about the services we need to provide. But it's really not about the $13 million. We've had really big ticket items. When you look at the Jaguars, when you look at University of Florida campus in Jacksonville, when you look at the public safety agreement, that's over $1 billion. And if you want to move the jail, which I think there's general consensus to get downtown development, we need to do that. That could have $1 billion ticket. So here, I think what you're seeing is an important policy discussion with both sides making very legitimate points. Some of it is positioning politically.
Yeah, wait. I'm going to stop you right there because that goes into my next line of questioning. I noticed 5 or 6 Republicans in front of City Hall at their big news conference. I asked Mayor Deegan, I said, Mayor Deegan, are these men standing in front of City Hall, are they doing this because they want to run against you? And she told me, I don't know if they want to run against me. They want to run for something. Do you think politics are at play in a lot of this?
I think politics are always at play. I mean, let's face it. My goodness, there's politics going on at City Hall, certainly so. But I do think there is a concern here about spending and a concern about how much spending. It's a lot easier to spend than it is to cut, especially when you have popular programs. But I think the mayor and the council president are making cases that are very important. It's a debate we need to have, not just for this year, but for future years, because the budget isn't infinite. It's finite, and you have to make some hard choices. And Jacksonville has some big expenditures ahead. So I think on the Republican side, they're trying to send a message. Let's face it, it's a very small millage cut. The mayor makes that case. The impact per household isn't much. But then the rebuttal from the mayor's side is that it would fund some important programs. From the Republican side, we're getting a lot of this from waste and abuse. So you'll go back and forth, I think, in an important discussion. But to your question, Does politics play a big part in this? Yes. 2027 is not that far away. It's a year from next spring. That's the next mayor's election. So you're always going to have politics as a backdrop. But there is an important spending and tax discussion going on in Duval County right now, and we should have it.
There's another spending issue going on between the school district and the city of Jacksonville right now with respect to, I believe, attorneys.
Well, this is about legal services. This is actually a little bit different, but an important conversation. And that is the school district wants to get its own lawyer to represent them. And the city council, which can do this in a limited fashion under the charter, wants to get their own lawyer and has for limited purposes. But I do want to talk about that for a second. Ed Austin used to say that the general counsel's office is the glue that holds consolidated government together. And what he's really referring to is that pre-1968, everybody had their own lawyer. Everybody in the city, the school district, they all had their own lawyer. And when they did, it did not work. It ran up fees, it brought us to a grinding halt. And one of the fundamental reforms in 1968 wasn't simply consolidation. It wasn't simply the creation of a strong mayor. It was the change in the delivery of legal services, that they be centralized, that one office, the general counsel's office, provide legal services to all entities of the consolidated government.
Which seems good in theory to me, but the school district has different needs than City Hall.
Oh, absolutely so, and I'll give you some examples of why that works well. As general counsel for 13 years, I had the great privilege of doing that, and if you do it right, quite frankly, and I hope there's some conversation around doing this, you can save money for both. It's in the taxpayer's interest done properly because you can save money. But as general counsel, you have to do some hard things. For the city council, for example, I had to tell them that their practice of special relief legislation was unlawful. That's where they passed legislation to help a particular constituent. They didn't like me for it. For the school district, I did a binding legal opinion that said they had to competitively bid their bus contracts. They didn't want to do that. They didn't like me for it. If they had had their own lawyers, their lawyers would have given them the opinion they wanted. It's a big conversation, and it should be thought about thoughtfully, Scott.
Well, Rick, thank you for joining us on the show today. And thank you for watching on air and on Channel 4 and the CW17 and online at News4JAX or streaming at News4JAX Plus. Don't forget to check out This Week in Jacksonville Business Edition. You can find the episodes Thursdays at 9 a.m. and on News4JAX Plus under the channel This Week in Jacksonville.
See why every day more people are choosing News4JAX, Northeast Florida and South Georgia's #1 source for local news.